The question I get asked the most from you guys is what rod, what reel, what lure, what line, all that sort of stuff. What are you using to catch GTs? So I've got my setups on the ground here, and I'm going to run through what setup I use, and then I'm also going to do, and I'm going to continue to do this after every trip, is a what worked. So what lures worked on each trip as I go. That can keep you guys up to date with what lures I'm using, what lures are working, what conditions were like when I chose to use that lure, and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, hopefully it can become like a little, I guess, a reference point and database for you guys who want to catch GTs to learn as we go. I'm still learning as I go. Every time you go fishing, you're learning, so it's kind of good to have, I think it's kind of good to have something like this where you can use as a reference when, oh yeah, this person used that in this condition and caught this. I might try that, or maybe I'll try something else. So if it's choppy, sinking stick bait, if it's nice and, or whatever, if it's deep water, a popper, whatever, we'll see how we go. This could be interesting, it could be really bad, but it's worth a shot. Okay, so first of all, the most important thing I think in fishing is your rod. Your reel matters as well, and you need drag pressure and a good strong reel, but I think the rod is the most important thing to fight a fish with, and you need that power in your rod to be able to lift a big GT. If you don't have the power and you have a soggy shit rod, you're not getting anywhere. The rod does most of the work, so you need a good rod. One thing I should probably say is when I fish for GTs, and I know some people are different, but when I fish for GTs, most places where you go fishing for GTs, there's the possibility of really big GTs. So I don't like to, and I've learnt this the hard way, I don't like to mess around using light gear and small hooks and small split rings. I like to go and fish like the next fish that's going to eat my lure is the 50 kilo one, because that's the one I want. So basically what I'm saying is I always fish as heavy as possible to prevent losing the 50 kilo fish if it comes and I'm throwing a light setup, which is probably what happened on the last trip I was on that you would have seen already. I hooked a big one on P6 and got smoked. Oh yeah. Brooksy. Coming at me. What are you? Oh, it's big. It's big. I'm filming. Oi, this is big. Possible. I might need the gimbal. Yeah, it's big, man. Oi. Oh, fucking light setup, man. Fuck me. So you don't want that to happen. If there's definitely GTs in the air and you're definitely targeting GTs, I would always say go heavy. So my heavy is, as you probably would have seen, Zanak Tabizo TC 8200. It's 8 foot long, lure best 120 to 200, lure max 230 gram cast weight, P 6 to 10. Max cast 230 grams. I normally cast lures around probably 120 to 200 grams of that. I have cast a big siren stick bait that was 280 grams with hooks and rings. This rod I've been using since April last year. I think, I don't know, it doesn't really even come into its own until the fish is at least 30 kilos. So if you want to fish for big fish, that's the one. And if you want to fish for GTs, that's the one. They're expensive, but the quality you get with a good rod and is unbeatable. You can stand there all day and cast and it's not going to break your back. So I've used shit rods in the past, and, well, not even shit rods, cheaper rods, and the amount of effort you have to put in and what it does to your body is so much skitzier, and you end up so much more sore than using a high-end rod. So if you can, I get asked this question a lot, what rod should I buy? I always would suggest saving that bit of extra money, doing your research and getting a high quality top end rod if you're serious about fishing. Save the extra coin and get something like a Zanac or the equivalent. Like Brooksy uses a Ripple Fisher, Cavi uses Temple Reef. There's other good ones, FCL, all sorts of stuff. If you're looking for a rod, maybe the best option is to, I don't know, if it was me, I'd hit up the guys at Fishhead and ask their opinion, because they're probably the most knowledgeable dudes I've come across in this sort of stuff, in knowing what gear to use and recommending products for people that want to do certain things. I'll link their website below and you can check that out. But yeah, that's the heavy one I use for GTs. With that, I run my Stella 18,000 with this one. It has a 20,000 spool on it, purely because you can get more line on it. I fish that with Tasline P10. It says 100 pound, but it breaks at 138.4 pounds, 62.7 kilograms. So that's the braid I'm using on my heavy setup for GTs. I haven't had a problem with wind knots, which is a major thing that you should consider when you're getting fishing line. If you're getting wind knots, it's a nightmare, so you don't want that shit. I don't know if it's got to do with, there's a big debate about wind knots, whether it's the person using it or the reel or the rod or where the first guide is or the line. I don't know. I don't really get them that much. I'm happy with this stuff. It's really good. And that's from Busted Fishing. Frank, he's a good dude. Yeah, it's worth a shot. With that, you would have seen in one of the videos from the last trip, my leader was totally peppered from a GT, so that's from rubbing on the rocks. And I always use, on that setup, I don't use anything under 200 pound leader. I've got here that leader that I used on that trip. I'll try and film it for you, hold on. So no, you couldn't really see it that well in the, can you see that? That is rubbing on the rocks, and that's not breaking. So like I said in the film, that's why I use 200 pound leader. So if you're fishing areas with bommies and stuff, it can rub and you're not gonna necessarily lose the fish every time. So that's been worn to shit and it's still fine. What else do you talk about? Alright, my next setup that I use for, if say I'm fishing somewhere there's heaps of Spanish mackerel or kingfish, or if I'm on the reef and the GTs are generally smaller, I will use this one, which is again Zanac Tabizo TC 83-150G, and that one is, it's a little bit longer, it's 8'3", lure best 90 to 160, max 180, P 5 to 8. Same as the other rod, I have cast heavier than 180 with this one. It casts like probably 150 gram stick bait. It's an absolute mile. That's a really good rod that I use predominantly around here for kingfish and Spanish and stuff, and I've caught a big Spanish on this and it was plenty of power. Saying that, I've seen Tristan use this rod and he caught a 30 kilo GT on it as well, so. Right. He's a good fish, man. It definitely has the power. If you're fishing for GTs every now and then and you're not really psyched on throwing massive lures and hurting yourself all the time by casting massive lures, that's probably a better option with a smaller reel, just purely because it's going to be lighter and easier for you to throw. So on that one I run this, that's my 14,000 Stella. Really good little reel, sick reel. On that I'm running P6 Varavas, which is that stuff. It's coloured every 20 metres or something, and that breaks out, I think it's like 88 pounds or something, which is still heavy as, but like I said, if I'm fishing for GTs I'd prefer to have the extra strength, and I think that thicker line gives you the extra knot strength as well, which is really important. When I'm fishing that setup, I generally use one 30-pound leader, just so it's still strong enough to handle that big. All right, and the final one I always take with me on trips is this one. This is the, hold on, I'll come over here again so we'll focus on it. This is the, will it focus? Zanak Tabizo TC 8050G. It is 8 foot long, lure best 30 to 70, max cast 80 grams, P 3 to 4. That's a sick little rod, man. This is the rod I used. You haven't seen it yet, but it'll be in the Stranded series coming up on the Morning Tide channel sometime this year. I use it for all the flat stuff, long-tailed tuna, Spanish mackerel, and it's a sick little rod for all kinds of fishing. I've caught a GT on it.
Brooksy's on big time. On the light. Are you alright, mate? Can you please smoke him in a bit, mate? Yeah. You got 30-pound line. Oh, bro. Oh, he's really big, man.
It's pretty big.
Really nice.
On that setup, man. Tuna, mackerel, kingfish, queenies. I caught barra on it.
Yeah. Just try and bend him a little bit so his tails. Yeah.
He's fucking heavy, dude. It's a sick rod. I should wash my rods better because that looks seedy as. Yeah, cast them all. That one, I used to have a 5,000 stellar on it, but I felt like it was a little bit too small and I never had any control over the fish, so now I've got 8,000. And it's just a little bit bigger, fit a bit more line on it. I've gone P, what did I put on it? P4 Taz line, so 40-pound Taz line, which actually breaks at 60-pound, and I got like 350 meters on that. I could have fit more because it's underspooled, so that's how thin it is, so that's pretty good. They're my setups, and that's what I generally take. I've got other stuff in there that I take when I'm fishing for bass or stuff around here, but that doesn't really matter. These are the main ones I use. All right, now it is on to the what worked part of the video. Yeah, what worked. So basically I'm just gonna tell you what lures I used on the trip, in what conditions and what they caught. And there's a really hot chip walking past. Holy shit. What was I throwing when I first got there? I can't even remember. The first session there was like a couple of like little queenies and stuff swimming around, and I had a swipe on a GT, and I hooked the GT on the what's it called? What's it called? The Sea Falcon. Look at that shine, man. And that's the one that reefed me. So after that, getting reefed on the P6, I thought I better go heavy, so I went heavy and I put this guy on, the big jack fin. I think it's 150 grams or something. Really big stick bait, floating stick bait. And straight away it got bocked. Come up, stand right up. Woo. Sweet. Does that look good?
Yeah.
That was a sign for me that they were eating big. They were psyched to hit big lures. I fished that one with a 6.0 BKK treble on the belly, and I think an 8.0 Shout Kadako single on the tail. The single on the tail just frees up the lure and gives it more action. So with my stick baits, I always run the belly treb tail single to make them swim the best that they can swim. Next one was this one, Strategic Angler. Same lure that I use quite a bit. I've said before that the wire is not very strong on this particular model. I've seen other ones that he makes with really thick, solid looking wire, but this one, I think he's updating the wire on this model from now on, so that'll be cool. But the wire hasn't broke, it just has bent a few times, but this lure just seems, I don't know what it is, if it's the color or the action, but whenever you throw it, it gets bocked. So I got one on that. That's a Strategic Angler Walker floating again. I got that one that swallowed the lure on this, Hero Skipjack 1 50. Inhaled that popper, man. I fished that with 2 trebles, 2 5.0 BKKs, because it's anything bigger sinks the lure, which isn't good. So 2 5.0 BKKs, and yeah, that works quite well. With that one, I fished the same hook setup as I would the big jackfin, so a 6.0 BKK treble and an 8.0 shout Kadako on the back. The other one that worked was this one, Siren. Really sick lure. Woo. It's extreme fast sinking. I think it's 135 grams. And it's built like a brick shithouse. It's indestructible, I'm pretty sure. I've caught heaps of fish on this thing, and I've never seen a lure with the build quality of it. Like, the wire just won't bend at all, ever. And the finish is really good. There's a couple of tiny little chips on it, but overall it's still in pretty mint condition. The only thing with this one, because it is a bit smaller, I fish slightly smaller hooks. That's a 4.0 owner something or other. I think it's 7.0 shout Kadako on the back. You can see with that, that is an owner hook, but I've squashed the barbs. Always squash your barbs on it, and that'll do the trick. The other one that I saw work, well, Caleb caught his fish on the Reef's Edge 130 popper, and then I gave him that to throw. FCL morning tide lure. 3 hits in 5 minutes. Didn't hook up. You kidding me? That was brand new, and now he's scuffed it all up for me. But it's good to know it works. Sick looking lure. I'm gonna throw that a bit on this trip, I think, and see what happens. The reason I kept throwing this lure throughout the trip is because I've used it before in Oman, and when it was quite choppy, it was still easy to work. So for a floating stick bait to work in choppy conditions is pretty hard to come across. So the jackfin and like the OTLs are the only ones I've found that you can really use in choppy conditions. So that's why I kept using that one. If it's really choppy, like it was off the rocks, I'll go to, and there's big current and it's really hard to work anything, I'll go to a sinking stick bait like that, like the Siren, or like a, in Oman I use the Heru Wahoo, which is like a subsurface thing, and it's really amazing. Otherwise, deep water, early morning, late arvo, popper. Midday, I tend not to use poppers that much. I know some people do. I know Jack Avery uses poppers pretty much constantly and always hooks up. But I kind of like the feel of a stealthy stick bait tweaking nicely over a big popper, just booming all the time. One thing with these two that I have been doing in the last trip was not sweeping the rod at all, just like winding slowly and pausing it, and it gives it a really good like rolling action, which seemed to trigger fish to eat it for some reason. I don't know why, but it'll be interesting to see if that keeps working or if it was just a weird one-off thing, but that was fully happening. So leader, I always use Varavas shock leader, 200, 130 and 80 is predominantly what I use. Sometimes I'll use 50 if it's like a chilled zone and we're fishing for tuna or something, but usually 80 is the lightest I go for saltwater big fish fishing. That's what I got. Split ring pliers. These are Shimano ones. Most people prefer the HPA ones, but they're like $70. Fucking $70, you kidding me? So, and they don't even cut your line. That's just what trips me out. They're really good pliers, but I don't want to carry 3 pairs of pliers, one for cutting, one for split rings, and one for doing whatever other thing. So these cut and they open big split rings, so that's the most important thing for me. Open big split rings and still cut your line when you're tying a knot. And I think they're pretty cheap, so they're good. I like them. Split rings, decoy, size 11. I think they're 300 pound. That's what I use for GTs all the time. Unless I know they're small, because I don't want a split ring straightening. Simple. Swivels, NT Swiv, 2.0 or 3.0 for big, smaller ones for lighter setup. Always have a swivel and a split ring attached to my lure. It prevents line twist and is a good way to tie your leader off to. As you can see, I've still got one tied on there. What else do I get asked? Oh, hooks. You know what hooks are. Generally use BKK trebles, either barbless, or if they come with barbs, squash the barbs with your pliers. And I prefer the Shout singles. The ringed Kadako singles are really good. The ones with the assist are also good, but I've had Spanish bite through the assist, so now I just prefer to go with the ringed ones. That's what I prefer to do. Gloves. I get asked this all the time, what are those gloves? There's the NAC 3D gloves. I'm lucky enough to get them for free, which is nice, but they're really good. I think they retail for like 50 bucks, but if you're a normal size Australian person, you want the 3 times large because the Japanese hands are smaller. Go figure. It's a NAC. Good. What else? I get asked this a lot. What shoes do you wear on the rocks? They are Dunlop volleys, 40 bucks a hit. They last like 1 trip before they start doing that. Worn out, mate. But they're super grippy and the bottom's nice and soft, so when I go into the shop, Kmart or whatever it is, I feel the bottom of every pair in my size and try and feel for the softest bottom of the shoe. The softest one I always get because it's grippier. One thing I always used to hate and I never used to use, but now I know it's really important to use, is one of these, a gimbal. This is Brooksy's gimbal because I have a shitty cheap one and I borrowed this for the last trip and I still got it, so I'm going to show you that. It's an MC Works one. I think it's like 250 bucks for a piece of plastic and a little strap. But the amount of leverage it gives you when you're fighting a fish is ridiculous. So without one of these, it makes it a whole lot harder. So if you want to fish for GTs, definitely get yourself a gimbal. Sunnies. I just got new sunnies, so I'm going to show you. Because I don't know if you can see my eyeballs, mate. They're sore and red. Pterygiums. It's from too much sun and the glare on your eyes, and it sucks. I think if it gets to a certain stage, you got to get them burnt off. So always wear good sunnies and always protect your eyeballs because you don't want to get your tidgies burnt off with a laser, mate. These are new ones I got. They're electric, from Electric Fishing. You can find them on Insta. I'll link it. And yeah, the legend sent me a couple pairs. They look pretty steezy. Brooksy. So they're my new fishing shades, mate. The lenses are really crispy, actually. So I think that's pretty much it of the what rod, what reel question. And can you hear that? I don't understand why they do that. Like, why would you want it to be the loudest thing in the world? I think that's about it. We're off again in 2 days' time, and it's gonna be good. So I've just unpacked all this stuff, so now I've got to pack it all back up and get ready again and tie my knots again, and I'm ready for action. I just got this thing back actually from service, big free Shimano service, which is pretty nice of them. And it feels really good now. Really good. It just goes by itself. If you have any more questions, obviously leave them down below and I'll try and get back to them. I'll always try and respond to everyone's questions and stuff. Like I said, if we can make this a reference point for any future questions or whatever, and then we can add to it each time after each trip when we do a what worked. Sounds good? What do you reckon, Jacko? Yeah. Sounds good?
Mint.
Mint. Alright, cheers. Yeamans.